On today's Two on Your Side Town Hall, how Western New York could benefit from so-called climate refugees and the migration caused by our warming planet. The perfect conversation to have on this Earth Day.
We will also take a look at some of the local efforts to keep the region clean and protect the environment.
And we have an exclusive tonight. There is a big issue with the ELA exams that your kids are probably taking in school this week. You're going to want to see that special report coming up.
And thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start with Earth Day and this annual tradition of taking some time to think about our planet.
Yeah, in a moment we'll talk with Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, a well-known group dedicated to protecting our waterways that we know are so important to having a clean and healthy environment. But we want to start our Earth Day 2021 coverage with a phrase that you may or may not have heard of: climate refugee. So that's a person who has been displaced from his or her home due to a natural disaster triggered by the climate crisis. NBC News reports that here in the U.S., there have been nearly 5 million of those climate refugees over the past 5 years.
And those people need a place to go. And we have reported on how Buffalo is a desirable destination. Now, we aren't immune from climate change and the warming of our planet. In fact, Climate Central shared this with us. Since Earth Day was first celebrated in 1970, the annual average temperature recorded in Buffalo has risen 2.3 degrees. But despite that, many see the climate crisis as an opportunity for Western New York. And joining us live to talk about this tonight is Hallie Jackson, whose report on climate refugees will air tonight on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. Hallie, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Kate and Michael, it is great to be with you. You, more than perhaps any city that we've talked to, really understand what this issue of climate migration is all about, given your viewpoint.
Yeah, so Hallie, I did a series of stories a couple of years back when Buffalo was kind of named as one of the best places for climate refugees, and an expert with whom you spoke for your story mentioned Buffalo as well. I want to play part of that exchange. Listen.
Is there any city that you're seeing right now, or maybe a few cities or locations that you think are doing this really well, that seem really poised for sort of that next thing?
I think Buffalo, New York is doing quite well. There's leadership there that is making this and making sustainability critically important among other cities.
So Hallie, what did you find in your reporting about how places are trying to essentially market themselves to these people who unfortunately are forced to move?
Yeah, or at least make themselves seem, able to handle what could be an influx of people. That was Jesse Keenan, Michael, as you know well, I think one of the country's top experts on this issue. He's been looking at climate migration for years, well before it was something we were talking about more broadly. And there's a couple of pieces at play here. First, a question that you ask is, okay, besides Buffalo, where are some other places? Because you're right, Kate, no city is immune to climate change. Every city is going to feel the impacts in some way. But there are some places that will feel it perhaps a little less or are well positioned to be able to handle that. And the answer, when you ask climate researchers, is generally you're looking at cities that are in and up, right? So cities that are away from the coasts and cities that are a little further north as well, that perhaps have some sort of environmental protection geographically, but that also have, and here's the other piece, the infrastructure, or are thinking about the infrastructure to be able to handle a potential influx of more people, right? It's things like affordable housing. That's an issue that came up again and again in our conversations. It's things like water security too. I talked to, in a different part of the country, a woman who was living on the coast of Georgia who was noticing more extreme weather, stronger hurricanes, sea level rise. She's a scientist. She's particularly attuned to these things. And she and her husband ended up moving inland. They moved to Asheville, North Carolina, nestled there in the Blue Ridge Mountains, because they felt like it was a more climate friendly, climate safe place to be. So Buffalo, Asheville, what are some other cities? Burlington, Vermont, Toledo, Ohio comes up a lot. Duluth, Minnesota comes up a lot as well. That gives you a sense of some of these places that might see a population increase, not today, not tomorrow, but in the decades to come.
It's a great conversation. We have to leave it there for now. Unfortunately, Hallie Jackson is the senior Washington correspondent for NBC News. Hallie, thanks again for being with us tonight.
Yeah, we could talk to Hallie about this all night long. You will not want to miss her reporting. Stick around to see that. The full report on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. That is coming up at 6:30, right after Channel 2 News at 6.
And we want to continue this Earth Day conversation now with Jill Jedlicka. She's the executive director of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. And Jill, we talk about Western New York being this possible climate refugee hotspot in the future, but What problems are we dealing with right now in terms of our ecosystem and watershed? And what is the thing that you would say not enough people know about this and they really should?
Well, happy Earth Day to both of you. Thanks for having me today. I think it's quite a few issues with our Great Lakes and our regional waterways that we've been dealing with for over 100 years. We certainly have an industrial history and a legacy of toxic contamination that we've been making significant progress on. So that's underway. But we also have ongoing issues and emerging issues like climate. And even though I think a lot of folks think climate change is just about warmer weather and warmer temperatures, we're actually seeing some impacts of climate in Western Europe already. We have increasing frequency of storms and lake seiche events, which is when the winds come in off the lake and really push the waters up and flood our region. We have invasive species that come into our area because of the changing climate. We also have issues with plastics that are ending up in our waterways and microplastics. So a lot of these problems are human induced and human caused. So I believe that, as we, try to market our region as this climate refuge and making lemonade out of lemons, it's really how do we protect and steward these resources, not only for our current generation, but generations to come. And that's really taking responsibility for our actions.
Jill, for people who haven't heard of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, you used to be Riverkeeper, the name changed, but your group is very well known here locally. And I wonder for people who are watching right now who think it's Earth Day, I'd like to come up with a plan and maybe do something to contribute to the betterment of our region. What is your group doing specifically and how can people get involved?
Mm-hmm. Well, the best advocates are the ones who like to get their feet wet and their hands dirty and to really dig in. And some of the easiest things you can do is just sometimes dedicate a couple hours of your time and your sweat equity, as we call it, and helping clean up our waterways, especially at springtime. We have our shoreline sweep kicking off this year, this weekend. It's actually going to be a 2-week effort. And we have almost 2,000 volunteers already registered. So you can either join a group or you can do it individually. And we are coordinating a lot of these efforts throughout the Great Lakes this year as well. And we also have restoration projects where people can learn how to do volunteer plantings and help us restore shorelines to their help and help improve our ecosystems. So there's many ways to volunteer and get involved.
Jill, what is on the top of the to-do list right now for Waterkeeper? What are you looking to work on? What's most important right now?
I wish we had a longer segment to talk about everything, but some of our top efforts certainly are dealing with our Great Lakes restoration and coastal resiliency, some of that residual historical contamination, but also kind of rethinking how we access our waterways through our Buffalo Blueway work that we're doing, and also Skajackwada Creek corridor. That's a big one for us as well right now. A lot of work to do, but there's a lot of momentum as well.
And your timing was perfect there because we were actually showing aerial video of Hoyt Lake. And we know Skajackwada Creek and how it flows into Hoyt Lake and the long-term problems that have been there. I mean, there are issues that date back many, many decades, right, of pollution and industry that maybe is no longer here, but we're still feeling the impacts of that now.
Absolutely. And a lot of these were just bad or uninformed decisions over the decades. And we know better now. We know that we need a healthy environment to have a healthy economy and a healthy community. So we're making better choices now as a society. We need to continue to accelerate that. Certainly starts with Hoyt Lake and Skajackwada because that is a problem that is solvable and we can deal with it if we just dedicate our time and energy to it.
And we have been chatting with Jill Jedlicka, the Executive Director of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. Thanks again for being here and happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.